The sun hung low over the dusty plains of Arizona, casting long shadows across the weathered fence posts of the Double R Ranch. Sarah Mitchell stood at the edge of the property, her eyes scanning the horizon where the desert met the sky. She had been working as a housekeeper at the ranch for 3 months now, ever since her husband had left her stranded in the small frontier town with nothing but a worn suitcase and broken promises. The ranch belonged to James Thornton, a widower who had built his empire from nothing. He was a man of few words, his face weathered by years under the relentless sun, his hands calloused from decades of hard work. He ran his ranch with precision and fairness, but kept everyone at arm's length, never letting anyone see past the tough exterior he had built after losing his wife 5 years earlier. Sarah had learned to keep her distance, performing her duties quietly and efficiently. She cleaned the ranch house, prepared meals, and tended to the small garden behind the barn. But as the weeks passed, she found herself watching James from afar, noticing the loneliness that shadowed his every movement, the way he would stand on the porch at sunset, staring at something only he could see. One evening, as Sarah was preparing to leave for the small boarding house where she rented a room, a violent storm rolled in across the plains. The sky turned black, and lightning split the darkness with blinding white light. Rain came down in sheets, turning the dusty road into a river of mud. James appeared in the doorway of the kitchen, rain dripping from his hat. "You can't go out in this," he said, his voice gruff but concerned. "Stay here tonight, there's a spare room upstairs." Sarah hesitated, her pride warring with practicality. She had always been independent, had always taken care of herself. But the storm was fierce, and the road was treacherous. Reluctantly, she nodded. That night, unable to sleep with the thunder shaking the house, Sarah found James sitting in the living room, a glass of whiskey in his hand, staring into the fireplace. She started to turn away, but his voice stopped her. "Come sit," he said quietly. "The storm's got us both awake anyway." They talked until dawn, sharing stories of loss and survival. Sarah told him about her husband, about the dreams she had given up, about the fear that she would never be more than someone who depended on others. James spoke of his wife, of the ranch they had built together, of the emptiness that had consumed him since she passed. "I can't live without a man," Sarah whispered through tears, the words spilling out before she could stop them. "That's what terrifies me most. I've always needed someone to tell me I'm worth something, to give my life meaning. I hate that about myself." James looked at her for a long moment, then shook his head. "That's not what I see when I look at you," he said. "I see someone who survived being abandoned. Someone who took a job in a strange place and did it with dignity. Someone who didn't give up even when she had every reason to." The words struck something deep inside Sarah. She had spent so long defining herself by the men in her life that she had forgotten to see herself through her own eyes. As the weeks turned into months, Sarah and James grew closer. But it wasn't the desperate dependence she had known before. James encouraged her to take on more responsibilities at the ranch, teaching her to manage the books, to work with the horses, to understand the business that kept the ranch running. He treated her as an equal, asking for her opinions, respecting her decisions. One afternoon, as they were mending a fence together, James stopped and looked at her. "I want you to stay," he said. "Not as my housekeeper, as my partner. In the ranch, in life, in everything." Sarah's heart swelled, but this time it was different. This time, she wasn't clinging to someone out of fear or need. She was choosing to build something with someone who saw her as whole, as capable, as worthy. "I'll stay," she said, "but not because I can't live without a man. I'll stay because I choose to build a life with you." Years passed, and the Double R Ranch prospered under their joint stewardship. Sarah became known throughout the territory as a shrewd businesswoman and a fair employer. She and James built something real together, something based on mutual respect and genuine partnership. But Sarah never forgot that night during the storm, when she had spoken her deepest fear aloud. She never forgot the journey from dependence to independence, from needing someone to choosing someone. One day, a young woman arrived at the ranch, looking for work. She had the same lost look in her eyes that Sarah had once carried. Her dress was worn, her hands trembled slightly, and she kept her eyes downcast when she spoke. "I need a job," the woman said. "My husband left me in town, and I have nowhere else to go." Sarah saw herself in this woman, saw the fear and the shame and the desperate need to prove her worth through someone else's eyes. She hired her on the spot, but she did more than that. Over the following months, she became a mentor, teaching the young woman not just how to work the ranch, but how to find her own strength, her own value, her own voice. "You don't need a man to define you," Sarah told her one evening as they watched the sunset paint the desert in shades of orange and gold. "You need to define yourself. When you do that, if you choose to share your life with someone, it will be from a place of strength, not desperation." The young woman listened, and Sarah could see the seeds of understanding beginning to take root. It was like watching her own transformation reflected back at her, and it filled her with a sense of purpose she had never known before. James came to stand beside Sarah, his hand finding hers. They stood together in comfortable silence, two people who had found each other not out of need, but out of choice. Two people who had built something real and lasting because they had first learned to stand on their own. The desert wind carried the scent of sage and possibility across the ranch. Sarah breathed it in deeply, feeling the weight of her past finally lift from her shoulders. She had come to this place broken and afraid, convinced that she couldn't survive alone. But she had not just survived. She had thrived. She had become the woman she was always meant to be. The ranch continued to grow, and Sarah's reputation grew with it. She became an advocate for other women in similar situations, offering not just employment but empowerment. She created a network of support, a community of women who lifted each other up and reminded each other of their inherent worth. On quiet evenings, when the work was done and the stars filled the vast Arizona sky, Sarah would sometimes think back to that desperate woman who had arrived at the Double R Ranch all those years ago. She felt compassion for her, but no longer shame. That woman had been surviving the best way she knew how. But this woman, the woman she had become, was truly living. James would often find her lost in these thoughts, and he understood. He had made his own journey from isolation to connection, from grief to hope. Together, they had created something neither could have built alone, but not because they needed each other to be complete. They were already complete. They had simply chosen to share their completeness with each other. As the years passed and the ranch became a landmark of success and community in the territory, Sarah never forgot her original fear. "I can't live without a man," she had once said. But she had learned the truth. She could not only live without depending on a man, she could thrive. And when she chose to share her life with one, it was from a position of strength, equality, and genuine partnership. The Apache girl's words had been born of fear and desperation, but the rancher's response had been one of recognition and respect. He had seen past the fear to the strength beneath, and in doing so, he had helped her see it too. Their story became one not of rescue, but of mutual respect and growth. A story of two people who found in each other not completion, but companionship on their individual journeys toward wholeness.